I don't think I've ever simultaneously loved and hated a game more than I do these Metal Slug games. They are so cool, completely insane, super creative and absurd, but at the same time, they are such a pain in the butthole to play. And as an obese fatty who suffers from anal fissures, I know what butthole pain feels like. Metal Slug Anthology released for the Nintendo Wii in North America on December 14th, 2006, a timed exclusive for the Nintendo Wii, releasing the next year on both the PSP and PlayStation 2. Metal Slug Anthology was a compilation of every release in the main series of Metal Slug games up to that time, including Metal Slug Super Vehicle 001, Metal Slug 2 Super Vehicle 001/2, Metal Slug X, which was a remake of Metal Slug 2, Metal Slug 3, Metal Slug 4, Metal Slug 5, and Metal Slug 6. Metal Slug is a series of side-scrolling run-and-gun action games with gameplay very similar to the more popular and more prolific Contra series. The first Metal Slug was released for the Neo Geo back in 1996. Metal Slug is crazy. Enemies leap onto the screen from every side, from the left, right, top, and bottom, so your character is constantly surrounded by soldiers and tanks and helicopters, shooting homing missiles, bouncing and rolling bombs at you, gunshots everywhere. Half the time, it's nearly impossible to keep track of everything that's happening on the screen at once. The game never lets up, never gives the player a break, is constantly throwing more and more waves of enemies and projectiles at you. Every level ends in a climactic boss battle, and these boss battles are freaking insane. A lot of them are just different varieties of giant tanks, bristling with cannons and machine guns, and lasers and spinning blades. Other times you're fighting an entire Zeppelin, an alien mothership, a massive hermit crab, this giant floating Japanese tiger thing, this huge robot face, giant alien centipedes, this robot cobra that eats this pillar beneath you as you ascend it, and even the Avatar of Evil, a planet-sized cosmic demon that wields a supernatural scythe large enough to carve the entire Earth in twain. These boss battles are awesome. The highlight of the series. At least half the reason I kept playing was just to see what the next boss would be, and they're really creative. Even all those giant tanks feel distinct and different from each other. A ton of work went into designing these, and they're all really impressive. The Metal Slug games are also known for their controllable vehicles, called Metal Slugs, where the game's title originates. These can be as simple as a tank, or as complicated as this tunnel spider robot thing, or as silly as this donkey dragging a cannon cart behind it. The games are absolutely gorgeous to look at. The sprite art is fantastic. A lot of these backgrounds are genuinely beautiful, and there's so much detail in every single enemy, especially those boss fights. So many little moving parts, which brings me to the animations, which are so smooth. I mean, just look at these bosses in motion. Look at how much is moving on screen at once. Nothing is ever static. Everything on screen is flowing and rumbling and blasting and shattering into pieces and melting and catching on fire. It looks freaking good. So, these games are awesome, but also screw these games. And screw the horse they rode in on too. I've already described the chaotic nature of Metal Slug's gameplay, and that chaos is really fun, but it's also what makes the game such a pain in the butthole to play. Your character can only get hit once. If you get hit a single time, you are dead. With the amount of garbage filling up your screen pretty much all the time, it often feels impossible not to get hit by something, so you're gonna die a lot. Metal Slug is really, really hard. Luckily, the game gives you unlimited lives, which is good, because otherwise these games would be impossible to play. You can die as much as you need to complete any level. You can die 1,000 times if you need to, and you will die 1,000 times, or at least I did. Much of my time with Metal Slug Anthology was spent moving 2 steps forward, dying to one of the 500 projectiles, filling my screen, respawning, moving 2 more steps forward, dying again, moving 2 more steps forward, dying again, etc., etc. At a certain point, making any progress in this game starts to feel like a huge chore. Its gameplay is sort of really tedious. The unlimited lives weirdly kind of dissuades you from actually learning the attack patterns and getting better because it just takes too long. It's much faster to stand in one spot, unload all your bombs straight into the boss's gullet, die, respawn, and just do it again. And since there's no meaningful penalty for dying, there's not really any reason to do anything else. You can pick up machine guns and rocket launchers, but those have limited ammunition, so you'll be spending most of your time battling with this little pistol. This pistol is one of the most worthless weapons I've ever seen in an action game. It's slow and pathetic and feels like it barely does any damage. A lot of time in these games is wasted very slowly whittling down your enemy's health with this pistol. For such a ridiculous and cool over-the-top action game, it feels really lame to have to use such a puny weapon all the time. The developers of Metal Slug prided themselves on the game's simplicity. Every game can be controlled with a single joystick and a couple buttons. This means that the games are very simple to control, and practically anyone could pick up any of these games and immediately understand how to play. Unfortunately, that simplicity is also very limiting. There's just not much that you can do with a joystick and a couple buttons. So there's not much your character can do. Your character always feels sort of slow and clunky, especially while driving vehicles, which can be frustrating because you control your vehicle's movements and aim their cannons with the same button. There's this whole boss fight where you have to run away in this walker tank thing while shooting backwards at the boss that is chasing you. But you can't shoot backward and run forward at the same time. So you have to stop, rotate your cannon all the way to the left, shoot a couple times, then rotate your cannon all the way back to the right to run away. And you have to do this over and over. The simplistic controls create these sorts of awkward to approach situations in a lot of the stages, which adds to some of the tedium of the gameplay. And most of these awkward situations would be alleviated if the developers just took advantage of a few more buttons on the controller. Speaking of the controls, the Wii version does use motion controls. To use bombs, you have to shake your controller. This feels completely pointless and kind of terrible, because it's really hard to shake your controller while also successfully dodging all that crap on the screen. There's no reason this couldn't have just been a button press, and is a prime example of developers using motion controls where they don't belong. So anyway, I did really like these games. I think they're super cool and very impressive. But I also really didn't actually enjoy playing them very much at all. Before I end this video, I do want to briefly run through each individual game in the collection. In the first Metal Slug game, you play as the Peregrine Falcon Strike Force, who are trying to stop evil General Morden, who's trying to take over the world with his army of dudes. This first game was very simple. You're a soldier and you fight other soldiers in a series of pretty straightforward settings, and almost all of the bosses are some variation of giant battle tank. The second Metal Slug game gets a little goofier and more creative. You start out in this vaguely Persian setting, battling dudes with swords, and then move on to this Egyptian setting where you battle actual mummies who throw magical potions. And when hit by these potions, your character transforms into a mummy, and then you keep playing as a mummy with a gun. I thought this mechanic was really cool. Anyway, in the second game, the evil General Morden has joined forces with an army of alien Martians, who later betray him, abduct him, and then your character joins forces with General Morden's army to defeat the aliens. The third game is where things just go completely off the rails, and I think this was my favorite one just for how crazy it was. In the first stage, you battle these giant crabs. In the second stage, you battle zombies. And similar to the mummies in the previous game, if you get hit by the zombies' vomit, your character transforms into a zombie, and then you keep playing as a zombie. In the third stage, you battle giant plants. And in the fourth stage, you battle General Morden again. Except it turns out that he's really an alien in disguise. And when you beat him, the aliens abduct your character. So then you have to play as a different character who flies into space and infiltrates the alien mothership, ending with a battle against the mothership's living brain to rescue your abducted character. It's really wild and really cool. The fourth and fifth games both felt like a return to the first game's simplicity, and they both felt a little disappointing to me after how crazy the third game was. The fourth game involves battling an evil scientist who is building a robot army, and the fifth game is about battling some kind of cult army who summon an interstellar cosmic demon at the end. The sixth game was easily the best game in the collection because it was the only game that included an easy mode, where instead of wielding that stupid puny little pistol, you get to play the whole game with a machine gun. Huge improvement. In the sixth game, General Morden once again tries to ally with the Martians to take over the world, and the Martians once again betray him. But this time, when they do, a second alien race suddenly invades and devours the Martians. So you have to battle that new invading alien army instead, and it's really ridiculous. There was actually only ever one more entry into the main Metal Slug series, Metal Slug 7, which was released for the Nintendo DS in 2008. Though the series is supposedly returning in the form of Metal Slug Tactics next year, so that's pretty cool. This anthology does include basically the entire series, and besides some irritating gameplay and some poor use of motion controls, it is an excellent collection if you can find it. Anyway, on this channel I will be playing many more frustrating games, because I am going to review every game ever released for the Nintendo Wii, or die trying. Oh yeah. Woo! Wee! Woo!